St. Andrews has brought me nearer to Jesus and continues to in new ways every day.
We are invited into following Jesus on the way of life.
I feel like I'm at home when I'm here, and my relationship with the Lord has just begun. I didn't have one until I came here, and I'm so thankful.
I really see the heart of Jesus in this community, and it's just like one beautiful, multi-generational family.
That's what the entire Bible is about. Receiving the goodness of God and His mercy and grace and forgiveness, and that being the catalyst and the power to step on the journey of following Him, following Jesus.
God put that in us, a natural desire to serve Him, serve others, and that's what we're doing here.
Welcome to Palm Sunday at St. Andrews, and today we're going to begin our time in our sermon looking at Luke chapter 19, which talks about Jesus and His disciples entering into the outskirts of Jerusalem. A little over a mile away, the crowds had begun to gather, and so Jesus tells His disciples, not just the 12, but a whole lot of men and women that were following Him at this point, to grab a donkey and to bring this donkey to Him. And that's where we pick it up. Verse 35 in Luke 19, if you want to follow along, and it will be on your screen. The disciples brought the colt to Jesus. They threw their cloaks on Him and put Jesus on it. As He went along, people spread their cloaks on the road. When He came near the place where the road goes down the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for all the miracles they had seen. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Some of the Pharisees in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." "I tell you," Jesus replied, "if they keep quiet, the stones themselves will cry out." And as He approached Jerusalem and saw the city, He wept over it. And He said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground. They will not leave one stone on another, because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." This is the word of the Lord, and we're really thankful to Him for His gift of His word. Luke 19, this story about Jesus on that trek to Jerusalem. During this season, we have been spending several weeks walking with Him on His journey to the terror of the cross, walking through different towns and with different people. We've wanted to see Him more clearly. We have talked about the need to first desire Him and then seek after Him, and ultimately last week to actually get up and make our way to Him. And as they approach Jerusalem together, there's all kind of people following Him. There's all kind of excitement. Could this be the day that the King has come to overthrow Rome and to restore Israel to its proper place in their history? The Davidic kingdom, it's called. David was king. So many anticipated Jesus to come in with might. Instead of coming in with might, He came in on a colt, a symbol of peace. And that's where it kind of starts, Palm Sunday. That week we call Holy Week. What's really interesting, if you actually take the time to look carefully, in the first three Gospels, there's 4 Gospels in the Bible about the life of Jesus. In the first 3, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, 1/3 of Matthew, Mark, and Luke is dedicated to this last week of Jesus' earthly life. 1/3. And the book of John, the final gospel, 1/2 of the book of John is dedicated to this last week of Jesus' life. You would never write a biography about someone and just include the last several days of their life. It wouldn't make sense. You'd want to see the whole picture. But the crescendo of where all 4 of the Gospels take us really begins that day. When they began to approach Jerusalem, Jesus told His disciples to go get the donkey. and the Old Testament symbolism of him getting on that donkey and beginning his trek a little over a mile to the edge of Jerusalem. Now, it's a really interesting thing because for the disciples, it was a wildly confusing time. Most of the time, I think we think, in hindsight, from where we look at it, is something like this. The disciples knew what was coming. They were prepared for it. They're courageous. They realized Jesus was in big trouble, and this was kind of a blip on the radar for the week. But there's no way that that was the truth. Even though Jesus himself had told them what would happen 3 times. That's recorded in 3 of the Gospels. 3 times Jesus said, I am going to go to Jerusalem and I'm going to be captured and I'm going to be killed. But the disciples didn't get it. Luke 18:31-34, it's the 3rd time he warns them. Jesus took the 12 aside and told them, we are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man, that's Jesus, will be fulfilled. He will be delivered over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, and spit on him. They will flog him and they will kill him. On the 3rd day, he will rise again, speaking of himself. Then verse 34 of Luke 18, the disciples did not understand any of this. Isn't that amazing? Its meaning was hidden from them, and they did not know what he was talking about. So we need to remember that these men and women, the multitude of disciples that were following him from Jericho and maybe Bethany as that whole thing played out, none of them knew what was going to happen. None of them knew what Jesus was going to do, what the religious leaders were going to do, even though Jesus had warned the 12 3 times. So they allowed themselves certainly to enter into the wild joy and party on the road. If you've ever been to the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, and 1 million people go to watch the horses and the bands and the cheerleaders, and it's such an amazing thing as they go down Colorado Boulevard. It seems like it might have had sort of that feel, as people are laying their own cloaks down before him with the cloak on that colt, Jesus coming in as the humble, peaceful king. And then they started laying down those palm branches and children waving them. And, you know, historically for so many of us, we see Palm Sunday as this day where the kids run and wave the palm branches. And that's so great. And yet this whole thing turns as Jesus kind of crests the hill before going down into the valley, before he gets to Jerusalem and sees the city. That's where we read it. Verse 41, as he approached Jerusalem, he saw the city. And these 4 words, he wept over it. I don't know if there's any way for us as we're on the journey with Jesus to the cross. We have now gotten to the point where we're beginning Holy Week, where everything comes together in the earthly ministry of Jesus for those 3 years as he begins to make his way toward Jerusalem. And that first part of that journey near Jerusalem on the colt was filled with joy and song and happiness. The Pharisees were so threatened by the power of the crowds. Jesus, tell them to stop. Jesus said, even the stones would cry out. You cannot stop the procession of the King. And what did they feel as disciples? Elation, joy, excitement. This is awesome. This is what we've given our life to. But then the whole mood of the thing shifts. And while the mood of the thing shifts, Jesus looks at this city where God dwelled in that temple there for at least a few more days. And Jesus sees that the people somehow had missed it, missed God's love and blessing, missed the reading of the Old Testament, missed all that had been said about him and what God was going to do to rescue not just Jerusalem, not just Israel, but all people and indeed all of creation. And so what did he do? Your Lord wept. He wept over the condition of the people that he loved. He wept over their inability to see what God had in store for them. He wept over the destruction that Jerusalem would face in the not too distant future as they rebelled against Rome, and Rome literally destroyed the city and the temple with it. So the disciples' emotions had to be going just from this elation and excitement into, he's weeping, he's moved. There's a dark cloud that's going to come over us. But they still didn't exactly know what they were facing, even though he had told them 3 times. Well, here's what he actually said as well. In Luke 9:23, the first time he warns them, he makes this incredible statement that those of you that have been around the church a lot, you know all these passages. And it would be really easy to feel like, well, I know that. This is Palm Sunday. I'm ready for Holy Week, ready to kind of go through the process, and let's get to the Easter. Be fantastic. In Luke 9, verse 23, which is the first time that in Luke where Jesus warns the disciples, Jesus says this, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross daily, and follow me. Anyone who wants to be my follower, anyone that's seen something in me, anyone that's begun to move in the direction that I have called them to, they must take up their cross daily and follow me. And still, those 12 and the whole crowd, nobody knew what he was talking about, because he literally meant the cross that he was going to. So what does it mean for us? See, we know that Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. We know what it means to somehow sacrifice our life for his sake, to give away our life. We know that he calls us to die to ourselves. And if a grain of wheat should fall, it has to die in order for it to produce all the fruit that God wants to produce out of that grain of wheat. We know all the teaching of Jesus, perhaps. But do we really know? We look at the disciples and go, why didn't those guys, get it? Perhaps we don't know quite as clearly as God would like us to. Perhaps as we enter this Holy Week this year, coming out of a horrific pandemic in the year that we've had, almost to the week, that because we know how the story unfolds and we realize that there is an ending to this that is triumphant and joyous, that next week live at St. Andrew's, 4 services, we're going to celebrate this return to life of Jesus Christ, the resurrection of the firstborn of all those who will be resurrected. We'll celebrate that. And so when we know that, we can say that to take up our cross daily has kind of a different meaning, maybe a more sanitized version of what Jesus actually had in mind. See, everybody in that time and that day knew what it meant to take up your cross. It meant you were on the way to the gallows. You were headed towards one of the cruelest forms of capital punishment that humanity has ever devised. It was intended to be incredibly brutal, incredible torture. This is why they would make them suffer on the way. And when Jesus says they must take up their cross, that had to be a stark statement. What does that mean for us? Well, here's what it means for us. This is why the church celebrates not only Lent, but especially Holy Week. And the fullness of Palm Sunday as Jesus weeps over Jerusalem. Because here's the first thing, is that as Jesus weeps over Jerusalem, he saw the people he had created and he loved. As the agent of creation, Colossians 1:15-20, Jesus saw those who he created, saw those whom the Father spoke into being, saw the ones who God had knit together in their mother's womb, and God so dearly cared for that he wanted to draw them back like sheep who are lost. And Jesus weeps because he sees the pain and the brokenness of what has happened ever since creation got broken apart. Well, what does that mean for us? You see, what Palm Sunday means is he sees you. He sees me. His penetrating gaze is not one of condemnation or judgment, or even, I'm going to the cross for you. I hope you appreciate it. It's he sees you in all of the experiences that you have had that have caused you to feel less than, to be brokenhearted and broken-bodied, to have relationships shattered, to move through life with all kinds of conflict, with everywhere we look and everywhere we turn, we just can't hold on to anything that's stable and steady. And he sees you and weeps. And he sees me and weeps. That's the first thing about Palm Sunday. Second thing is, therefore, Jesus Christ went through that week and ultimately through the humiliation and suffering and to the cross. This week at St. Andrew's Live, if you're able to be with us, we are having a Maundy, Thursday service in the sanctuary on Thursday night at 7 p.m. with communion. And we're going to remember what took place the night as he was betrayed. And then on Friday, what we call Good Friday, we will have a service outside on our patio from noon to 1, where we will remember the death of Jesus Christ on the cross, leading to Easter on Saturday night and all through Sunday morning. But see, he not only sees you and me, he has gone the length to sacrifice himself for you and for me. That's what this week is about. That's what this Lent is about, is to lament and recognize and acknowledge that we are so desperate for him. And as we come out of the pit, we can come to him, but it's only possible because he went to the cross. So he not only sees you, he made the decision to sacrifice on your behalf and my behalf. That's Palm Sunday. And the third thing is what he said to his disciples in Mark 10:45, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. He sees, he sacrificed, and ultimately he has come to serve me, serve you, by giving his life as a ransom, literally to buy us back from the ravages of our own brokenness and rebellion against his love. And so that's the third thing that he's done for you and me. He serves us. And he has continued to serve us in giving us the gift of life and of joy and of beauty and of peace and of a mission and a vocation, that all our longings come together in him because Jesus Christ has come to serve us as a ransom for us, to see us, to sacrifice on our behalf and to serve us. That's what Palm Sunday begins, this Holy Week. But you know what? Palm Sunday is not just about us. One of the things that we have typically done in the history, even of the church itself, is we have allowed ourselves to approach Holy Week and Palm Sunday only through the eyes of those who have already come running to him, especially the disciples. Because the disciples, through all of their experience, they knew Jesus saw them, especially as he rose from the dead and then ultimately ascended, and he gave them their mission to represent him. That Jesus saw them, Jesus sacrificed for them, and Jesus served and serves the disciples. And it's easy for us to say, the gospel is really about me. And so I'm going to celebrate Palm Sunday. I'm going to celebrate Holy Week. I'm going to go to Maundy Thursday so I can remember, take communion. I'm going to go to Good Friday so that I can take a careful look at the cross to realize what Jesus has done for me, and then celebrate his coming out of the tomb in the garden at Easter and be thankful for what he's done for me. Yes, yes, and amen. But if we leave it at that, we miss what Jesus was doing when he crested the hill and wept for Jerusalem. His deep passion, his emotion, is not simply for us a long time later, or for those disciples there that day, but it was for all those who didn't even know he was coming and making his way to the cross on their behalf. For all those today, what is it he asks of us as we receive the gift of Palm Sunday, Holy Week, and ultimately the cross? To join him. Because he said in Luke 9 to the disciples, anyone who wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. Our call is to join him on the way to Jerusalem. Yes, to desire him, to see him more clearly, to seek him, and ultimately to come to him, but never stop there, but to join him in his mission to bring his kingdom of unity and wholeness and peace to all of creation, to every single person that would but turn around and come to him. See, we must join him, and that means we must join him as he sees. We need to see. What does it mean to see? Jesus wept. I was kind of a part-time pastor for a few years in Burbank during my time as a professor at Fuller Seminary, and there was one Palm Sunday where we'd given the palms to all the kids, and they went running through, and it was very exciting, and the people were dancing kind of, and the congregation was very excited and taking pictures of the kids. And so I gave the sermon, but I read the text where Jesus actually did weep. And after the service, everybody's kind of outside milling around and eating their cookies and coffee and saying hi. And this one child or young man, somewhere between 8 and 10, I don't even remember his name, sitting there in one of the pews, about 3 rows back. And he's sitting there kind of looking at his palm branch and looking sort of kind of pensive like that. And I walk over to him and I go, hi, and I knew him. He goes, hi. So I sat down next to him and said, you okay? Oh, I don't know. Well, what's going on? You know, we got these palms and we told us to wave them and yell and shout. And it's really fun and it's really exciting. And then we're waving the palms. And then he wept. I looked at him and I just saw this, you know, kind of technically it's called a cognitive dissonance, kind of this throwing him off, the emotions, the shift, is he wept. And then he looked at me and he goes, he wept on Palm Sunday. Almost like he ruined Palm Sunday. It was so awesome. And then all of a sudden you tell me he wept. And man, so we had this great talk about what Jesus was up to and what he was doing. Do you see the homeless person that you've come to recognize at Westcliff? Do you see the person sleeping on your street? Do you see the person bagging your groceries? Do you see your neighbor? Do you see your child? Do you see your parent? Do you see that police officer patrolling the streets? Do you see those all around us the way Jesus sees? That's the first thing. That's the call of taking up our cross daily, is to make sure to remember our vocation is first to see, and secondly, we're called to sacrifice. What does it mean to sacrifice? It could be very little. It could be the little things that somehow lift someone up so they experience the goodness of the gospel. I was with a man named Verley Sangster. Here's his picture up on the screen. Verley at the time was the head of multi-ethnic ministries, the urban work they called it in Young Life, of senior vice president. I was working for Young Life as regional director at the time. And we were somewhere and entering a restaurant, and it was a pretty important meeting we were going to have. This great man who was a leader in this organization I love so much, Young Life. And as we're approaching the table, we didn't have a lot of time. There was a young busboy that came to wipe the table quickly. And Verley started this conversation with this young man and spent literally 10, 15 minutes talking to him about his life, and ended up praying for this guy and sacrificing his important meeting, his time, to pay attention, to see, and to sacrifice. It's a little tiny thing. Maybe there's a bigger sacrifice where once a week we go down to Whittier and we read some stories to second graders. Or maybe we give up some of our money that we so carefully save for our vacation, and we determine where does God actually want to use those fundings. It doesn't really matter what the sacrifice is, but to deny ourselves, to take up our cross daily and follow him, it means not only do we see the needs and the pain, but we sacrifice in order to partner with Jesus and participate with him. And then we see our life, our vocation, our calling to serve. See, that's what the cross is about. Jesus came not to be served, but to serve as a ransom for many. And that's why we do communion. Every week during this season, we have taken time to have communion together. So on this Palm Sunday, I want you to remember that as Jesus took the bread and he broke the bread, blessed the bread, gave the bread to his disciples. He said, "Take, eat. And as you do, remember me, because this bread is my body that was broken for you." Not just you, the disciples, but you sitting here watching this. That Jesus went to the cross as your ransom, as your king who comes on a colt, as the one who sees you and knows you, as the one who sacrificed everything for you, and the one who has served you, not only in the cross, but ever since, in wooing you to him. May today, as you eat this bread, you remember him and how much he loves you. Bread of life. Who sees, who sacrifices, who serves. Then in the same way at the end of the meal, he took the cup. And as he poured the cup, he said to his disciples, "This cup is my blood." Especially this time of year, we recognize that the cross was brutal. Sheer terror. It was meant to scare the populace into submission, but it was used on the only totally loving, wonderfully giving, perfect person that ever walked the face of the earth, the one who sacrificed everything on behalf of all. "This cup is my blood," he says, as his blood was shed on that cross. Just the next day, as you drink this, know that I've given my life for you. So this Palm Sunday, know that he sees you. As you drink this cup, know that he has sacrificed everything for you. The blood of Christ, cup of salvation. My young friend, Burbank, and he wanted the joy of Palm Sunday. It was hard for him to understand the shift from the joy to the weeping. There's joy that will come. But for now, let us receive the gift of knowing what our God has gone through in order to buy us back. And may we, as we give our life to him, take up our crosses daily and follow him.